What is going on, alpha males? Welcome to Alpha Male Podcast, where we gather together in this virtual tribe and talk about manliness the right way. Because we are made in the image of God, strong, dominant, and in control. And we don't apologize for that. What specifically are we going to talk about today? E.D.C, beyond the firearm. If you listen to this, it's entirely possible that you listen to Gunfighter Life, do a whole other podcast about guns and gunfighting. Yet, you may not listen to that podcast. You may not be into guns. You may live in a place where guns are prohibited. I know, by God's grace, there are listeners from all over the world. Guns may not be part of your everyday carry. They may not be part of your personal protection plan. And there's plenty of episodes on guns and carry guns on Gunfighter Life. You'll know that I've spent the majority of my adult life as a professional gunfighter in one way or another. I guess that's a good place to get ready to plug in the bio, but we're going to talk about more than just that on today's E.D.C episode. More than just the firearm. Bio. First and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life, serving God, following Jesus. Combat veteran, served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Professional big game hunter and guide. If you feel called to support, check out Patreon. There should be a link in the show notes. With that, I am your host, Michael Milito, and I am blessed to serve you today. Now, I think your E.D.C can and should change depending on environment. And you might say, well, then that's not E.D.C because E.D.C means everyday carry. Yeah, I guess in a strict legalistic sense that would be correct. However, I think that may hurt you in regards to E.D.C. if the point of E.D.C is being ready and prepared. From that bio you may deduce I've lived large chunks of my life in large metropolitan areas. I don't carry the same things E.D.C if I'm in that environment as I do when I'm out in the wilderness. I'm on the Idaho-Montana border right now in the Bitterroot region. Beautiful, beautiful, blessed country. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows us his handiwork. If I'm being honest with you, I just got done skinny dipping because I didn't plan on going swimming, and I had my accoutrement with all my E.D.C and gun and everything. And I just got done dry firing out in the woods, and there's a beautiful, clear river. I jumped in. Took my clothes off and jumped in. I didn't have to worry about it. Why? Because there's nobody around. Because the population density here is awesome. I don't carry the same things E.D.C in the Bitterroot Wilderness on body that I carry in L.A. or in Central Florida, where the population density is over 400 people per square mile. Right? It's just not. I don't carry the same stuff, and I don't think you should either. Some of the core things I don't think should change, but many of them will. And that may change urban versus rural. It may change winter versus summer. It may change what I would call in the military mission specific, but you may call something else. For instance, I'm recording this in the year of our Lord 2023 on the 6th of July. On July 4th, mentioning that I was in the Bitterroot region, my wife wanted to go see fireworks. So we went on a several-hour round-trip expedition to the giant metropolis that was the nearest town with fireworks of 35,000 people. And I decided to carry 2 tourniquets. Now, I don't normally E.D.C 2 tourniquets. Why would I E.D.C 2 tourniquets on the 4th of July? Well, because it's not unheard of for people to blow their hands off and get really injured and things like that on the 4th of July. So mission specific. If I'm going to watch fireworks in a bigger city than what I normally am, and a lot of people are blowing stuff up, a lot of people are drinking and blowing stuff up, right? That's probably a good time to adapt my EDC and put 2 tourniquets on, right? That's kind of a thing there about mission-specific EDC. Let's talk about a couple of big ones. Urban versus rural. You'll know, if you've listened, I'm a big fan of EDCing a fixed blade. I really like fixed blades for EDC, but I know that most people EDC a folding knife for legality reasons, and even I'll carry a folding knife if it's for legality reasons, for whatever the case may be. One of my go-tos for years and years when I was in more of a city environment was the Gerber 06 Auto Tonto. A partially serrated Tonto, is a great all-around urban EDC. It's great for puncturing stuff, which can come in handy. It's great for prying on stuff, which can come in handy. Also, those partial serrations come in really handy. That's a great urban EDC. It's a great bashing tool. It's got kind of a semi-blunt, semi-pointed bashing end on the other side for breaking things. It's got the Tonto blade for piercing things, even metal. It's a great urban EDC. It would do it, but it wouldn't be great for butchering a deer. That's just one example. Let's say that my go-to, and it's not, but let's say that my go-to actually was for a short time, but let's say my go-to EDC knife was the CRKT M16. They make a menagerie of different blades for that. Different, not just different ones with serrations and non-serrations, but even different kinds of serrations, right? And different blade profiles. Again, when I was in more of an urban environment, I had one of those in a Tonto. I think that makes a lot of sense for an urban environment. It makes less sense in a rural environment. Not that you can't, but you get what I'm saying. If I was fairly split between the two, like sometimes I was in an urban environment, sometimes I was in a rural environment, and I was going to switch out my EDC, I might switch back and forth between 2 CRKT M16s, one traditional, just a plain edge, drop point, and a Tonto partially serrated. You get the idea there, adapting your EDC. On that, let's talk about some of the things for an urban EDC that I sometimes carry and don't generally carry when I'm not in an urban environment. So we covered a Tonto blade, partially serrated. Also, something I'll often carry or often carried in an urban environment is a push dagger. I like the push dagger. A push dagger is a brawler's close-up, in-tight fighting weapon. I've got a bit of fighting experience. I'm talking hand-to-hand fighting experience. One of the great things about the push dagger it's a deadly force multiplier for punching. If you're a good brawler, if you're good at punching and boxing, if you're familiar with that, then you put a push dagger in that and you're lethal. And you don't have to worry about any special techniques or anything. Not that I don't know and haven't been taught knife fighting techniques, but just if you're literally getting your head pounded into the pavement and you can just grab that and brawl with it, it's a great thing to have. And I would often carry one tucked in on my left side, the opposite side of my gun, for several reasons. Just like I carry my EDC knife on the left side, on the opposite side of my gun, so that I can access the weapon with both hands, so that I can use it to get to my weapon if something or somebody is prohibiting that. But I would often carry that push dagger for that reason in an urban environment. They don't weigh very much. They don't have to weigh very much. I guess you could get a big, ridiculous, giant one. And there might be some application for that in like a bag or something, or like a pack strap or something. But as an urban EDC, just a reasonable sized push dagger for a get off of me tool. Because in an urban environment, people can generally get close to you, especially in crowded urban environments, without raising many alarms, where somebody wouldn't do that in the country. Even if you're around people, there's generally, by the liberty of the population density, no need to get that close to people. But if you're talking about downtown on a street corner, People are going to be a lot closer. That's a big advantage of a push dagger. It can work well when you're in close and personal. Other things that I carried for years in an urban environment, and I still have, and I still would probably carry if I was spending a chunk of time in an urban environment, a handcuff key. Now, I'm not telling you to do that to get away with anything nefarious, but I'm telling you a handcuff key, especially for people if you're traveling. Not all people with handcuffs in all areas are moral and just and ethical. A handcuff key. They don't weigh very much. A handcuff key weighs very little. Also, something that I would often carry is lockpicks. Now, and not for anything nefarious. I'm not telling you to break into stuff. I'm not telling you to loot and riot or things like that. But lockpicks, rather, can come in handy for all kinds of things. You ever lock yourself out of your gym locker, lock your keys for your gym locker when you're at the gym in the locker? Well, if you got in your pocket, lockpicks, it's not a big deal. You ever lock yourself out of your house or garage? Or just misplace the locks on a padlock that you haven't opened in 6 months? You're like, where's the key? I don't know. You could spend half a day looking for the key unfruitfully, or you could just grab out your lockpicks and open the lock. Lockpicks. You run into less locks where there are no locks in a rural environment. That's a good example of a good urban E.D.C. Lockpicks. Some other things that I would often carry, because there are more, let's just face it, there's generally more non-permissive environments where you can't carry knives and legit weapons in urban environments. They tend to strip those freedoms away. The more levels of authority you add, the more chances are that they're going to take one of those liberties away, right? That's just a reality. A couple of different things I've carried over the years. There's a thing called a sap cap. It is basically a baseball cap with a lead pouch sewn into the back of it so you can grab the bill. And if you know how to use a sap, basically a blunt striking implement, a great force multiplier, it's not a bladed weapon. Most would not recognize it as a weapon at all. The sap cap, it's not bad. Also, Bone Tactical, I don't know that he knows any idea who I am or that I have a podcast or anything, but he makes a thing called the bone opener, and there's different things of that, but they're basically a metal object that does many things that one can hold in his hand. And if you go check those out, the bone opener, that's a pretty cool thing to have, a pretty good thing to have. I even flew with mine. Also, another thing for non-permissive environments, again, your E.D.C might change day to day if you know you're going into a non-permissive environment. A good, hefty leather belt with a big, beefy brass buckle. Right? There's all manner of ways you can use that. But I still have it. I've got big brass, I guess it's not like a cowboy big, right? But it's a big brass LAPD belt buckle. I used to be LAPD. I saw that. I grabbed it. I've had that thing for years and years. I got it on a leather belt. That's a legit, good, sturdy belt. And you can use that for all manner of things. But talk about a force multiplier. A leather belt with a big brass buckle. And where could I not take that, right? Take that into a concert, take that to the airport, take that pretty much anywhere that I want. I don't generally wear that much anymore because I'm not in those kind of environments. I carry a full-size fighting handgun. If I have somehow lost the ability to use my full-size fighting handgun and my knife, probably don't have time to whip out that belt, right? Plus, if I snap my gun onto it, then I can't really grab the belt out quickly because my holster is strapped to it. So, but in an urban environment, especially in a non-permissive environment, you may think about that. You may think about a big, beefy belt buckle as part of your E.D.C. If you're in a place where robberies are common, you may also think about ways to hide stuff that people don't normally search, like your hat, the rim of your hat. It's a good place to store like Spectra, which if you don't know is like a really harder than steel, much lighter than steel kind of wire, commonly used in fishing. And I use it in fishing too, but it can be used for all manner of things. Put legit metal wire in the brim of your hat. They make the kind of cash belts where you can hide stuff inside your belt, or you could just take a piece of duct tape and tape stuff on the inside of your belt, like the aforementioned handcuff key or lockpick, if it's a flexible lockpick, all manner of things, right? A real common one is putting cash. A lot of travelers know to put cash in underneath the insole of your shoe. Cash can get you out of a lot of things. Although that's so common that people might look in the sole of your shoe. So maybe a different place that you can hide cash. A cache for your cash. But talking about urban EDC, cash absolutely I think should be part of your urban EDC. For sure. Right? Because you have more places to spend. It's not, $1 million on the side of a mountain in the Bitterroot Wilderness isn't going to do me a whole lot of good unless I burn it. There's nobody there. I have to interact. It's a medium of exchange. But in an urban, suburban environment, cash, absolutely. Even for something as mundane as you forgot your wallet that day, but you have backup cash, so now you can get gas. Something as mundane as that happens all the time. That's kind of one of the big things of EDC, right? It's not just for, when the peanut butter and chocolate hits the fan and zombies are coming to pee in your radiator. It is for day-to-day stuff like that. Like you forgot your wallet, but you have cash. Those are some things that I carry in an urban environment that I don't generally carry in a rural environment. I'll start doing a transition, talk about things I carry in rural that I don't really carry in urban, and things I think you should just think about carrying in general that you may not. A good transition for that's good for different reasons, but good in both environments. Mostly in that urban environment in a non-permissive armed environment, a metal stainless steel water bottle, right? That is a legit weapon that you can pretty much take anywhere, especially today. 20 years ago, it was weird to see somebody walking around with a metal water bottle. Now, people that are into health and hydration and stuff like that, it's very common to see somebody walking around with a water bottle. Instead of just having a plastic water bottle, have a metal, have a stainless steel or aluminum or titanium water bottle. And different sizes are obviously better or worse for different things, but here's a great force multiplier. Just making a handle out of 550 cord, or those little paracord survival bracelets. Not all of those are created equal. I would get one with a good buckle that's not going to break, but you strap one of those on your handle and now you've gotten a lot more leverage to swing that thing around. Or you can just make your own lanyard out of a piece of 550 cord. That's a legit weapon. That is a legit impact weapon. You can grab it and smash stuff with it. You can swing it. That is a weapon. Also, a little tactical tip for that. If you want to carry a store of wealth, you can literally drop a silver bar or a couple of silver coins in that metal water bottle. One, silver is got a lot of cool properties. It's good for you. It's antimicrobial. It's got all kinds of good properties in there. You can have a silver coin or silver bar or two in that water bottle. If you just wanted to add weight, you could get the pure copper coins. Although I think silver is a better way to go. But that's a thing you can do. But a metal water bottle. And then transitioning. That stainless steel water bottle is one of the most used things when I'm doing my backcountry wilderness expeditions. I am toying with the idea of going on one tonight. I've been doing a lot of those recently, especially since I'm in this beautiful remote area. I might do one tonight and leave at night and bug out at night and do a night bug out exercise. But one of the most used things when I do those things is that stainless steel water bottle. I've had the same one for like 15 years. In fact, it's one of my most used things. I'm thinking about getting a titanium one just to save weight because I go long distances and it's probably worth the money. But for 15 years, I've had this stainless steel water bottle. Urban environments, rural environments. Again, it's one of my most used things. And where are you going to go that you can't have a stainless steel water bottle? You can even have one at the airport, right? You got to dump your water out because the water might be a terrorist. But the stainless steel water bottle is good to go. So you dump your water out, you go through the checkpoint, you fill it up with water because water is heavy. And it's good to have water on hand. But you get the idea there. That metal water bottle, good in both environments. Talking about the more rural environment, just a straight swept back blade, whether it's a clip point or a drop point. I kind of really like the clip point better because I do a lot of skinning and gutting of animals and fish and things like that, and I like to kind of use it as a sharp finger. And there's a knife called the Sharp Finger. That's a great knife. One I used a lot as a professional big game hunter and guide. But just a clip point, I'm doing it right now with a Buck 110 Slim. I've got my index finger at the point of the knife. And I can reach up inside animals and carve out the heart, the liver, the lungs, all that stuff by just pointing my finger. I like the clip point for that. It works better for that than the drop point. But either one is good. Just a good for, more rule use. Just a straight edge, clip point, drop point blade. I'm a big fan of carrying a fixed blade. My go-to would be for pretty much any environment. If I could only have the one knife, I would have the Firecraft 3.5 Firecraft. It's an amazing knife. I actually ironically got it for an urban environment when I was the commander of a tactical team and I was doing knife fighting grappling stuff, and I thought, I carry a knife on my left side, but if I have to deploy it and somebody's beating my face in, I may or may not be able to open that knife. So I started carrying a fixed blade. That's one of the ones that I started carrying. And when I'm in rural environments, it's a really good knife for that too, because it's great for its namesake, starting fires, for a camp knife, for a butchering knife. It's an amazing knife. I like that one for a rural fixed blade. And if you're in a rural environment, you probably can carry a fixed blade. I carry it inside the pocket, urban or rural if it's legal. One of the other ones that I often carry that I'm actually carrying today because I'm in shorts and it's a little bit smaller, is the Tops Mini Tracker Model 2177. It's a phenomenal knife, urban or rural, but you get a lot more use in the rural environment. I think it's got a saw on it that's not a gimmick. It's a good little knife. Good for all kinds of working of wood and butchering animals. It's a great little knife. Now, some of the things that I carry that I wouldn't necessarily need to worry about in an urban environment, fire starting. So on my Firecraft, that one comes with a ferro rod. With this Tops Mini Tracker, I attach a little toggle ferro rod. They make these little ferro rods for going on your jacket, going on your pack. It's basically just a ferrocerium rod with 2 holes drilled in it, and you can use it for attaching it to stuff. Since this one didn't come with it, I attached quite a bit of micro cord to the fire starter so I can start a fire with that knife. And I also carry water purification tablets. Now, you might make the argument that the water purification tablets are good for either environment, because if there is a big disaster, a lot of people, urban or rural, get really sick and or die from dirty water. So water purification tablets, I carry them in a little small titanium container. I can fit 10 of them, and it's about the size of a really large multivitamin. And I can carry 10 water purification tablets in there. And it's titanium, so it's super lightweight. But the fire starter in an urban environment, I don't think you really need to do that, because if you have any kind of ingenuity in an urban environment, you can start a fire. I mean, you usually have electricity. Even if the power goes out, you have batteries, car batteries, gum wrappers, right? There's ways to start a fire pretty easily. Probably easier than you're going to do with a knife and a ferro rod. Again, if you think outside the box. So I wouldn't really care so much about fire starter in an urban environment. I'm not telling you not to carry it, but again, if you have some ingenuity, it's a lot easier to make fire there than in, the rainforest of the Pacific Northwest. But the water purification, I didn't, but I probably should have. It's a good idea probably for both, the water purification tablets. Because if there is a big disaster and what you have is your E.D.C, it'd be good to not die of dysentery. Also, I carry, on the fire thing for the rural carry, I carry a Ranger band, which is basically just a big, beefy rubber band that goes around the knife that burns really hot and really long. It's a great fire starting thing. I started doing that when I was in the Pacific Northwest because I just took for granted that if I had a knife and I could make a spark, I could make a fire. Living in the Southwest, Nevada, Arizona, southern Idaho. But you get to the Pacific Northwest and I'm less confident in that, especially if I'm injured or something. I want some tinder on me. Also, I carry wrapped around the knife, there's an ulti clip on it, that's why I clip it into my pocket. I've wrapped around there a decent sized length of fishing line and a fish hook for obvious reasons. Also, for less obvious reasons, I can, if I need to, because there's little notches in the back of that knife, I could snap that off, make it straight, rub it on a rock, and now I have a needle. So I can sew up damaged kit. So it's multifunctional in that way. On that Firecraft that I mentioned, pretty much the same things. I have a small piece of fire cord on there, which is a little bit more tender. If you don't know, fire cord is like 550 cord with a flammable wick inside of it. That's got a full-size ferro rod and a whistle, water purification tablets, fish hooks, and the Spectra wire, which is even stronger and harder, and a length of micro cord, and the Ranger band. So you get all that functionality there. It slips right inside my pocket, doesn't weigh very much. And again, I wouldn't worry so much about the fire starting stuff. In fact, when I carried it on the tactical team, I carried the Firecraft, and I took the ferro rod and the ferro rod attachment and stuff off because I'm in an urban environment. Probably don't need that. When I went back to a rural environment, I put it back on. That's what I'm talking about, thinking out your E.D.C. Because there's a limit to how much stuff you're going to carry without giving yourself away, right? You don't want to look like you're smuggling ball bearings in your pocket. I slip that in my pocket, especially if I slip it along the seam of my pants. I wouldn't say completely concealed, but it's about as concealed as a folding knife because it goes inside the seam of the pants. The seam of the pants kind of folds over most of it. And if I'm carrying a pocket knife with a clip, that clip is hanging out of my pocket. So you get the idea there. So that's some more rule stuff. One thing that comes in really handy for both is a good flashlight. A good flashlight, Streamlight MicroStream, is plenty bright enough for many, many things. This one looks like it's already been through the apocalypse. It's one of the things I carry in my pocket. I think this is my second one. I think I might have lost the first one. I may be wrong about that. This one looks like I've had it a long time. But it's a good little MicroStream. It's USB rechargeable. They also make like a stylus, which is small, but it's not USB rechargeable. And if you use yours all the time, like I tend to do, it's good to have the rechargeable capability. There's also a bigger one that I like. It's a Streamlight version, and I carried that more when I was in an urban environment just because I wanted a little bit bigger flashlight. And that was cool because it would take the CR123s or just a standard AA. But a good, handy flashlight. This one I added some duct tape, some orange duct tape. One, because when it falls on my pocket, I want to be able to find it, right? If it's in my pocket, then you can't see the orange duct tape. But if it's out of my pocket and I drop it, I want to be able to find it. Or if I'm doing stuff and I set it on the ground with the light off, I want to be able to find it. And its default color is like a bronze, which is not great for finding in the woods. Also, duct tape's handy for all kinds of things. More fire starter. It's great for you get a blister on your foot or making an ad hoc band-aid. Whatever the case is, duct tape's good for all kinds of stuff. And why not wrap a little bit of orange duct tape on the front of that flashlight? Also gives the added benefit if I drop it, it gives a little bit more protection from cracking the flashlight on the front end. So there's that. And that's really important. A flashlight, you'll probably find that's one of your most used things. It's so much more functional than the flashlight on your phone. Going to the phone, one of the great things I advise you to have on your phone for any environment is the Bible app. So you can read your Bible in a bunch of different translations pretty much anywhere. You can even download it so you can read your Bible in that small compact thing that you probably have anyway without service. That's awesome. But you can also get different survival manuals on your phone. And inside your phone case, you can store extra cash. We talked about the extra cash. That's a good place if you're not worried about somebody stealing your phone to store the extra cash. Because how often have you gone out and remembered your phone, but you forgot your wallet? Just a good kind of common sense thing. Have the cash in your phone because you usually have a phone. Also, I like to carry a small, handy blade back there. Now, I have a bunch of little scalpel things for like my butchering knives that are exchangeable blades, the Havalons, the outdoor edges. I carry a spare blade back there that's in a wrapper. And the main reason I carry that is for cutting stuff out of myself, which is not uncommon to do. You get a splinter, you get something shoved into you. I could dig in there with my pocket knife, but it's a lot better to have a nice, sterile, really sharp blade. And that could come in handy for all kinds of situations. If I did lose my primary cutting tool, my primary knife, I have a backup, really sharp blade. Not hard to fashion a handle out of a stick or something like that. Another thing that I've really gotten big on carrying the last, I don't know, year or maybe a little bit more than a year, but that is phenomenal, is the old Victorinox Classic. It's like the smallest, I think, version of the Victorinox Swiss Army knife. And it's very, very small. It's like when I put my thumb over it, I can cover the whole thing and it disappears. That's how small it is. But it has a very small cutting blade, and I use that a lot. That's like my sacrificial cutting blade, right? If I'm opening boxes, cutting tape, that's the knife that I'm going to dull. That way I can keep my good go-to fixed blade knife sharp. And that little tiny blade will do most things. And if I'm digging into something that's going to dull the blade, I don't really care. It's not a super steel, but it's not a bad steel, meaning it's pretty easy to sharpen. So it's a good sacrificial blade. So there's that. It also comes with something I actually use a lot is the little small screwdriver on it. And they engineered it in such a way that's really simple and kind of genius. You can use it as a Phillips head or a flathead screwdriver. And I use that all the time for adjusting sights on guns, for the random loose screw that you don't want to go digging around in your proper toolbox. It's not a major thing. You're going to tighten one screw and it'll fit. It's good for that. Also, it can be used for if you get a malfunction and a weapon and you don't want to go prying in there with your good fixed blade knife and chipping, the blade. You're trying to remove some stuck brass or something like that. That little flathead screwdriver can come in really handy. Also on here, that I use a lot. I think I talked about it in a bug out episode. I lost this for a time, and I went on a bug out exercise without it, and I quickly realized how much I use it. But tweezers. It comes with a little set of tweezers that tuck in. Those are good for all kinds of things, especially when I was in the Southwest for pulling out splinters. When you interact with a cactus the wrong way, or your dog does, super handy for that. Handy for other splinters. Also handy for goat heads and getting them out of your clothes and your shoes, which I ran into but a while ago when I did a bug out exercise here in Idaho. Those things got everywhere in my shoes and drove me crazy. And it's a lot harder to pull them out with your fingers than it would be with a set of tweezers. But I find myself using the tweezers a lot. Also, you can pretty easily snap those apart and make lock picks if you know how to pick locks. So, although in a rural environment I don't generally carry lock picks, I do generally carry this, which could be easily used for that. The other side is the toothpick. Now, I could care really less about having a toothpick, but what I did is I cut it into kind of a Tonto shape, and I can use that to pierce stuff. And that comes in handy for poking holes in fabric or poking holes in things. When you cut it into that Tonto shape, it can be quite sharp, and it's plastic, but it can puncture pretty good. And I find using that as like an awl can work pretty well. The backside is a pair of scissors. I gotta be honest, if I were designing this, I'd probably put something on there besides the scissors. And I do use the scissors from time to time, but it's such a handy little tool that, and it's so small. I really like it. Attached to that, the little key ring, I have a mini Sharpie that goes in my pocket. Mini Sharpie I use all the time, mostly for marking myself. Also, reaching in my pocket, I carry it on me sometimes, and I'll be honest, sometimes I don't because it's so light and small that I forget that it's there and it stays in the pocket when the pocket goes in the laundry. Today it's in my pocket, and that's just a length of micro cord. Micro cord is like 550 cord, except micro. It's very small. I think it's 100 pounds instead of 500 pounds, but it's small and light, and I can carry quite a bit of it in a small bundle in my pocket. It's a good thing to have. And it's not that expensive. If I use it, no big deal. I just make another bundle of it and throw it in my pocket. I do use it. I was making stuff out of micro cord today. I was making my dog with a bigger piece of rope. I was lashing it together and making a really lightweight collar because we might be doing a backcountry night exercise and he has a backpack and I didn't want him to have his big heavy collar with the backpack. So I made him a really light way to carry identification. Anyway, just one example, right, that I use today. But having a length of that stuff in your pocket, it weighs so little that, again, I often don't have it because I leave it in the pocket because when I'm patting the pockets down, I don't even feel it. Now, moving around the pockets. One thing, and this is a thing that might change winter versus summer, right? Right now, I carry in my pocket one of the disposable mosquito wipes, one of the disposable bug wipes. because if you get down some of the rivers and stuff around here, it can get quite mosquito-y. And although not a life or death situation, it's way more pleasant if I can just wipe myself down and not get driven crazy by mosquitoes. That's a good thing to have in my E.D.C. They're little small, like one-time use wipes. One of those is very thin, very minuscule. Also a thing that I have, since I'm fairly new to this area, this Bitterroot kind of mountain range on the North Idaho-Montana border. I've lived up or around here before, but I'm less familiar with it. But I have a little small map of the area. And I just cut out the area of the map that is germane to me, right? Where I would most likely be able to get to on foot. I have a big road atlas and stuff in the vehicle, but if I'm on foot, how far am I reasonably likely to walk? I have a rough map of that area. That's something you may want to consider. Even if you know your area really well, your AO, your area of operation, maybe a loved one or something doesn't really. They don't really pay attention. They don't really know the area. You could literally give the map to them with the Sharpie that's in your other pocket, right? And write on there. For whatever reason you have to split up, or for whatever reason you have a rendezvous point, and you give them the map with something marked in there and say, if something goes wrong, this is where we live, this is where we meet. Something that simple, but a little small map, again, the part that you're likely to use takes up very, very little space. Also, and this might be big news for you guys that stay up to what I normally carry and stuff like that, I've switched to my everyday carry tourniquet. For a long time, even when I was on the tactical team, commanding a tactical team, for a long time my go-to was the rat tourniquet. Now, I know that the cat is better from a pure medical standpoint, but I'm talking E.D.C, right? If you carry a full regular cat Gen 5, Gen 7, whatever tourniquet all the time as E.D.C, I applaud you for that. I just don't do that, right? It's not discreet enough. It's just bigger than I'm going to carry. I'm just being honest. Whether on a tactical team, whether you're working overt, covert, or just day to day, I found the rat really nice. And since I'm already generally carrying a spare magazine on my off-gun side, in a very similar magazine pouch, I would fold up and carry a rat tourniquet. That was my carry for a long time. I've recently switched. And not because there was anything wrong with that setup for carry, but I bought like a knockoff brand to train with and mess with, and then I bought a legit SWAT T tourniquet. And the reason for that is because it's more multifunctional. The rat tourniquet is a good tourniquet. It's not the best tourniquet, but it's lightweight. It's actually pretty fast to use, and you can use it on smaller people or dogs. But the SWAT will do all that, but it'll do more. You can wrap it looser and use it as a bandage. It's basically a giant rubber band. Or like one of those big medical rubber tubing things. And when I say big, it fits in my back pocket pretty easily. It's more multifunctional. I can use it as all kind of bandages. I can make a sling with it. I could use it to make a splint if I'm in the backcountry and I snap my ankle. By God's grace, that won't happen. But you get the idea. I can use it for a lot more than just a tourniquet. But it's also a decent tourniquet. Again, not as good as a cat tourniquet. I fully concede that. But I just generally won't carry one of those day to day. I'll carry one of those in my bag. I'll carry one of those in my truck. I'll carry one in my shooting bag. But for a day-to-day E.D.C tourniquet, I've pretty much switched. I pretty much can say at this point, for most days, I'm carrying the SWAT T. It's just more multifunctional. It even has instructions like printed onto the actual tourniquet. So if something were to happen and I were to get it, and I was going to use it and I was the one that was injured and I literally opened it and passed out, somebody could likely pick it up, look at the instructions, and apply it to me. Right? It's got the instructions printed on the tourniquet, but it's more multifunctional. So I've switched to that, and it just goes in my back pocket. With my wallet is a very simple canvas and leather kind of minimalist wallet. I did write my phone number on the inside of the wallet, so if an honest person wants to return it, if they find it, they can return the wallet to me. I have a picture of my wife and myself, like an old school picture, in case something were to happen, right? I would like a backup picture if something happened to all the electronics or whatever, or lost my phone. I would like a picture of my wife. And I've got a few cards and IDs and ways to pay, not just one. And I think that's important. Don't just have a card. For whatever reason, the card doesn't work. The bank shuts off your card for some kind of fraud thing and you're in a spot where you need something. it's good, I think, to have 2 different cards. Even if one doesn't have a lot of money on it. One of mine doesn't have a lot of money on it, but it has a little bit so that I could pay if I have to. And I gotta be honest, I'm out of my spare cash that I normally have. I need to replace that. Just whatever you think is prudent. Maybe just $20 in your phone case or something. I should have that. I normally a lot of times do, but I spent it and I haven't replaced it. But the spending tells you that it's useful. Well, that's pretty much it for the wallet. Obviously, carry a firearm. I will generally carry a full-size fighting handgun and a spare magazine. That's all I'm going to say about that. Again, you can go to Gunfighter Life if you want more on that. A belt is also really important, and also really important is your shoes. I generally, and this is going to depend on you, but generally I like trail runners. I like trail runners for rucking. I like trail runners for bug out exercises. I like trail runners for day-to-day. I even like trail runners for trail running, which I like to do. But a trail runner is a good all-around shoe. If you can find one that works with your normal dress, I would really recommend those. But a good shoe with laces, as much as I like Crocs, I generally don't wear those unless it's around the house or whatever. Maybe if I'm going to walk in the river or something like that. But something with laces, not flip-flops, even in the summer, not sandals. You know, when I was a kid, that was fine, but now I'm a man. I want to be ready. But the trail runners, I actually really like those. If you have to wear dress, like dress pants, a suit, I've been there, been corporate management, had to wear a suit and tie. There are dress shoes that are dress shoes and they're super uncomfortable, like you would picture dress shoes, like the shoes for the dress uniform we wore in the military, super uncomfortable. There are also dress shoes that look really good that are super comfy, like the Skechers. They perform like a tennis shoe, but they look like a dress shoe. Those are awesome. If you have to wear dress shoes, that's a big deal. Shoes that are comfortable, shoes that you could walk several miles in, shoes that you could sprint in. But shoes, I probably should have started there. They're super important. Again, urban versus rural. If you're in an urban environment, you may not need the hiking boots, but you probably need good shoes that you can walk a long way in. I don't care if that's a pair of not white New Balances, right? Whatever's comfy and functional for you. And again, don't think that my E.D.C has to be your E.D.C. This is more of a methodology of thinking about E.D.C, depending on your environment. When I lived in Flagstaff in the winter, it's crazy cold there and snow everywhere and really, really windy, meaning it would be pretty hard to start a fire, pretty miserable to try and start a fire there. And it got so cold, I figured if something bad happened, that would be a bigger danger is freezing to death. It's cold there. So I carried one of those USB rechargeable electric lighters that the wind can't blow out, with a Ranger band around it in my pocket. That was also a flashlight. Made a lot of sense for that environment. Now that's in my bug out bag. But that was a great part of my E.D.C in that environment. And that's just a way to think about that. What do you need? Right? I'm Italian. I have olive skin. I'm not saying that I won't burn in the sun, but it takes a lot. If you're Scots-Irish and you work the grave shift and you're super pale, then your E.D.C, especially in the summer, may include one of those little small vials or one-time use wipes of sunscreen, right? That may make a lot of sense for you because peeling off blistered skin is no fun. It doesn't really apply to me, but it may apply to you. What is important for you for your E.D.C? What's practical and what's not practical? What's so big that you're going to forget it? You're like, oh, I'm going to carry this, but it's just so big you're just not going to carry it. And for me, that's the cat tourniquet. It's a great tourniquet. If I was putting a tourniquet on myself or somebody else, unless they were really small, that'd be the tourniquet that I wanted. Like I've had TCCC training. I know that's the best tourniquet, but I'm just probably not carrying that on me all the time. But the SWAT is a really good tourniquet too, and I will carry that all the time. So what's practical for you? Don't think that because I carry a fixed blade, you need to carry a fixed blade. I think they're great. I think they're good for a lot of things. I think they're very simple, less likely to break, and they're much easier and faster to deploy, but maybe you can't, or maybe you just don't want to. Have a good folding knife. I'm a big fan of the Buck 110 Slim. That's my number one recommendation. And I've tried a couple of different knives recently to see if I could supplant that in that same kind of price range, and I can't. If you want a slightly smaller knife than the Buck 110 Slim, and I'm denoting the Slim, that's important. It's so much better for E.D.C than the Buck 110. The Buck 110 Slim. There's also the 112. Also the Buck 112 if you have like a blade length of, you have to be under 3 inches. I also, one of the ones that kind of a runner-up is the K-Bar Dozier. I got one of those when I was shy a Buck 110, and I thought I would try it. I don't think it's as good, especially for me, as a Buck 110, but it's not a bad knife, and it's a little bit smaller. So if you want a little bit smaller knife, it's minimal. Right? I can literally carry it in a pair of shorts without a belt. Not a big deal. It's so minimal, I think sometimes I go to bed with it in my pocket. It's not my go-to E.D.C knife, but it's kind of my, like, I have to run out real quick and walk the dog. So I grab a Smith & Wesson J-frame and the K-Bar Dozier. It's a good small little knife. It's big enough it will be okay for most tasks, but just a good practical folding knife if you're carrying a folding knife, if you're not going to carry a fixed blade. Think about it. Your life or somebody else's life literally may depend on it. Anyway, with that, I want to say thank you for listening. If you value this knowledge, if you value the point of the podcast to make godly men strong and strong men godly, right? Kind of the mission statement for this podcast. If you value that, if you value this information as much as the next shiny thing on Amazon, you can go to Patreon. I will try and take several pictures and upload them of this conversation, of the stuff I've talked about, and upload those not just for patrons. Most of the stuff on there is just for patrons. There's some stuff on there you can look at. I will try and take some good pictures and upload them of my general go-to E.D.C. And you can go listen. You can go check out Patreon and just look at that stuff for free. And while you're there, if you think some of the stuff on there is worth it, or any of the information in this podcast is worth the fraction of the cost of the next thing you're probably going to buy on Amazon for E.D.C or other purposes, and you want to support, consider becoming a patron. Anyway, as a thanks for listening through all that, tactical tip of the day. This came up in the chat talking about the Firecraft. It's an awesome knife. It has a little notch, like a half moon notch cut out of the back of the blade. And that's for use on a ferrocerium rod. It's called the Firecraft. I agree with one of the other patrons that said that's not a gimmick. It actually works really well. You got that knife and the ferro rod in your pocket, even if you have to ford a creek, like Oregon Trail. Like if you fall, if you're super wet, no matter what, you should be able to get a fire started if you have material to make a fire with that setup. And using the back of the knife is preferable to me than using the front of the knife, because then you're going to dull your blade and you might need that for other things. I got to thinking, I haven't done this, but you could make that notch with a Dremel tool. And if you're into guns and shooting, likely you have a Dremel tool. Especially if you're into like competition shooting, you likely have a Dremel tool. You could easily make a notch on the backside of most knives if you're going to start carrying a ferrocerium rod. Or if you just have a round file. Again, if you're into guns and gunsmithing, I have a gunsmithing file set. I could cut a notch into the back of the blade. Also, a lot of knife blades are coated with like Cerakote or some kind of plastic rubber coating. That's not going to work well if you're trying to make a fire with the ferro rod. Cutting that notch in there and leaving that exposed steel with a sharp 90-degree edge on the back of the knife really could come in handy. So if you want to start doing that, that's a good tactical tip. Making your own little ferrocerium rod notch in the back of that knife. That's your tactical tip of the day. Oh, and you know what? I'm going to throw in a bonus talking about the backcountry stuff for navigation. The moss growing on the north side of the tree thing, that's not really true. But a way you can navigate, you can take a fairly straight stick and put it in the ground. And you can take a rock or a pebble or something and mark it where the shadow starts. Watch it for a while, half an hour. It'll go faster depending on the time of day, obviously in the arc of the sun. But the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, right? This is news to nobody. So the first place that casts a shadow, you drop a stone. And then when you're done, you drop a stone in the other place. And that will make a line from west to east. Yes, west to east. You draw a straight line from those two rocks. Then you draw a 90-degree line, and that'll give you your north-south. Good backcountry navigation if you don't have a compass. Just a bonus tactical tip of the day. Likely many of you knew that, but if you didn't, that's a good thing to know. Your tactical verse of the day. Wherever you are, whatever environment you're in, remember that everything, all physical matter in the universe, everything that you interact with, see, touch, smell, was made by God. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Today's verse. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. That's a good verse that I don't think really needs any commentary from me. Men, hopefully part of your everyday routine is being in that word, the word of God. Wisdom, courage, and strength are found in that word. Be a man. Read your Bible. With that, thanks for listening. Have a blessed day.